had before. Remember, this was a man that went to the wilderness and journeyed with Israel all through. Nobody was afraid to look at his face. But on the account of fellowship for 40 days, he subscribed an identity that he kept that nobody could behold him. But remember, I said that identity is temporal. As long as you remain within the throne room that gives the identity to you, you sustain the identity. When you leave it, that identity disappears. This explains why Moses never had the glory all through his life. At the point the glory departed. Why? He departed from the mountain. So on the account of fellowship, both spiritual and human entities assume identity. Secondly, entities in the spirit, both spiritual and human, assume identity by a name. When somebody said, "What is your name?" they're asking you, "Tell me your identity." What is your name? Invariably, they're asking you, "Tell me your identity." So, aside fellowship, the second way or mechanism where entities, both spirit and humans, assume is a name. Now, there's a scripture in Exodus 23, verse 20 to 21. Exodus 23, verse 20 to 21. Now, I want you to understand that Israel were a rebellious people. So, God himself led them by the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. And then, a time came that God discovered that their rebellion has come to a level of crescendo. God says something in that scripture that I want your eyes to see. Look at what God said. God said, "This particular angel I am sending with you, be careful with him." I am not talking about Moses talking here. I'm talking about God himself. God had to call Israel to order, because God knew Israel were rebellious. So God warned them. He said, "Be careful with this angel." The reason is because God said, "The angel will not tolerate your rebellion. Other angels that went ahead of you might forgive you, but this one will not tolerate your rebellion." Why? Because God said, "My name is in him." This angel, be careful with him, for he will not tolerate your transgressions, for my name is in him. So it means angelic creatures and entities also bear the name of God. Oh, let me show you something. Maybe your eyes will be open more. The Hebrew name for God is El. El. This explains why, if you want to translate the strong man in Hebrew, you say El Gibor. Why do you put El first? El. That is the name of God. So that El is the name of God. The other one is the attribute you want to add to that name to give it an expression of what you want. Gibor, he said, means strong, but El means God. So if you say Gibor, you are saying strong. But if you say El Gibor, you say God, the strong one. So El in Hebrew means God. If you want to say Turi in Hebrew, you are saying rock. But if you say El Turi, you are saying God my rock. If you want to say El Yeshua, you are saying Jesus. But if you say El Yeshua, you are saying Jesus is God. If you want to say Ola, you are saying eternal God or everlasting God. But if you say El Ola, you are saying God is eternal. So El is the name of God. To show to you from scripture that angelic entities bear the identity of God via name. Most of the angels reveal the scripture. Their names are sealed with the name of God. For instance, look at the word Michael. What seals that name?
Michael.
What sees that name? Look at Gabriel. Now, listen to this. Listen to this. Listen to this. I don't want to go outside the circumference of the scripture. If I journey with you to Apocrypha, remember, there were the books that were not added to the original canon. So if I journey with you to Apocrypha, I will begin to review under angelic creatures that were hidden in Apocrypha. But the reason why we don't talk about them is because they were not accepted as part of the canon. If not, I would have proven to you that there is another creature recognized by the book of Tobit and the book of Enoch called Uriel. Another called Raphael. Many of them, that their names are sealed with E-L, the name of God. But because they are not part of the Bible, I dwell on Michael and Gabriel to show you that their names are sealed. So when God said, be careful with this angel, for he will not tolerate rebellion, for my name is in him. God means I sealed him with my name. This is angelic entities. Now, I also want you to know that human entities also bear the identity of the name of God. There are men that God has sealed them with his name. You don't understand? I will show you a scripture. If you look at Genesis chapter 17 verse 4. Genesis chapter 17 verse 4. It was God's desire that Abraham became the father of all nations. You remember that? God desired that Abraham became the father of what? All nations. Now, in as much as God desired that that patriarch became a father, assume a fatherhood, there was something that God needed to do to translate desire into manifestation. It is one thing to sustain a desire. It is another for that desire to crystallize. So it was God's desire that that patriarch became a father of all nations. But there was something vital. It was called naming ceremony. Do you know what God did to him? In Genesis 17 verse 5, a naming ceremony was initiated. God said, from today, your name shall not be called Abram, but Abraham. Initially it was called Abram. But now, Abram means an exalted father. But Abraham means father of all nations. There is a system in the Hebrew translation. We call it tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton. It is a system in the Hebrew culture. What does it mean? Tetragrammaton is a system that reveals the personality of God in 4 consonants. It's a system in Hebrew. It reveals the personality of God in 4 consonants. The first is what is called J. The second is called H. The third is called W. And the last is called H. That system in Hebrew, it is called tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton. It reveals the identity of God in 4 consonants. The first consonant is J, the second is H, the third is W, and the last is H. Many a times, if you are looking at the Hebrew Bible, many a times you see that the name God is spelled in these 4 consonants. JHWH. Anytime you see that in the Hebrew translation of the Bible, you know that they are talking about God. Now, in verse 5 of Genesis 17, remember God had already sustained a desire, and his desire is that Abraham will become a father. But God knew the identity or the name that patriarch assumed could not launch him into the reality of that desire. So in verse 5, God took his identity called H and infused in the identity of a patriarch and a mortal man that obtained favor before the court of heaven, and he became Abraham. He was called Abraham, but the letter H was added. Letter H. What happened? That letter H infused a divine identity in a patriarch, to the intent that the desires of God over that patriarch will come to pass. God knew it was impossible for that patriarch to assume Abraham and their father nations. So the H must be added. The mystery of H. Do you understand what we're saying now? He received an identity. He received an identity. And then his name was sealed with the Holy One. I want to show you scriptures as we progress. See that. Genesis 28:14. Genesis 28:14. God also promised Jacob that Jacob as a man will operate universally. You see, the habitation of Jacob was to spread her tentacles over the four walls of the earth. Do you remember that? This explains why in that scripture God said, thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth. You remember that scripture? And thou shalt spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south. You shall spread to the west, the east, the north, and the south. It means it was the desire of God for Jacob to operate universally. Both to the north, he should dominate. Both to the south, to the west, to the east, Jacob should dominate. God desired that after that encounter.